Welcome to Evolving Waves, a podcast from Stingray Branding. Today's episode features Alan Thompson, founder of Stingray Branding, who has started two other businesses. More importantly for today, he has overcome a few terrible choices of partners he chose to marry to have an incredible relationship now. Join us as we deep dive the story that has made Alan into who he is today and the lessons he learned that has allowed him to have a wonderful relationship today and how those impacted every aspect of his life. He is the definition of an evolving wave, riding the tides of adversity to reach the shores of success. Alan, how are you doing today?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Got some coffee here. Looks pretty it's a little bit stronger now. Yeah, I think as the day's going on, I'm increasing the intensity of it some. It's losing its effect from this morning, so
Yeah,
building up a little bit.
gotta get it through. The
Yeah.
coffee is the only way that we do that in the marketing and I'm sure other industries. Well, let's kind of just dive deep and give us some insight into your past relationships, where you are now, and just the timeline of your life.
Yeah, so um for those that have known me for the last 16 years or so here in Charleston networking, I've had a couple of relationships that have been significant marriages. Um, Started out pretty young in high school. Had a child my junior year of high school. He was born in the middle of my junior exit exams, and like most people that have kids at that age, I got married. Um, Tried to do the right thing there, and the only way for them to get access to military benefits were to be married. So got married, and um, as most young couples do, grew up in different directions. The Army kind of whipped me into shape, led me one direction, and changed my personality forever into the A type, straight line person or whatever, if you will. And that was not who I was in high school, and that was not who I married. And those personalities can clash. So from that, and went single for a few years there. Got involved with another um, person a couple years after that was helped me with kind of launching GBN and then doing some things with that. And that person was pretty active, but ignored lots of red flags, made lots of bad decisions through that process. Kind of got involved for all the wrong reasons, and that relationship did not last very long at all. I think it was like less than 2 years total. But the person was with me at a lot of events and business, so lots of people met that person, and then from there went on to being single for a little while longer, and then met my ex, which was a 9-year relationship, and was the one that will be the focus of the majority of what we probably talk about today. That's the one that had by far the largest impact in every negative way, but in some positives because I learned a whole lot of lessons through that one, especially the last year and a half, 2 years of being together. That I spent a lot of time thinking about and learning who I was and learning what I needed to do, and really setting me up for actually being very cynical towards relationships and marriage and all that stuff. And by the time that one ended, I was ready to say I'll never date again, and I'll never marry again, and I'll never do anything again, and I don't want to have anything to do with love or relationships or any of that stuff. But I guess some would probably say I'm kind of a hopeless romantic. Because shortly thereafter, whenever I was trying to not find anybody, I ended up finding somebody. But this time, with all the lessons learned from the previous relationship, that has really created an amazing relationship that I'm in now.
It's awesome. So let's focus on, so what were some of the challenges that you faced in your last relationship?
Yeah, so the person that I was with in my last relationship um, was, uh, I would say, pretty close to the definition of a narcissist. Um, she was very manipulative, manipulative, um, tongue tied. She would there it was like life was a never ending roller coaster. Every time that I would get on a high, there would be a low right afterwards. Anytime that we would start to gain any type of momentum, we would get punched in the face again. Um, Typically through something that she would cause or do, or something going on in her life, not usually because of something that was going on in mine, and we would get drugged back down to the bottom and be like rebuilding all over again. And the cycle went on month after month. Um, I don't think there was any time period more than maybe like 6 months that we made it without something happening over the course of multiple years. And as the years went on, it just got larger. The challenges got larger, setbacks got larger, the gaps to have to overcome, the drama and the insanity just got wilder, um, to the point that it was in absolutely insane what we were going through the last year and a half or so. With kind of diving in a little bit deeper. I mean, some of those were, um, it started out as all relationships do, right? You're in that honeymoon phase. But there are some pretty crazy red flags that were there right away. Um, and I was young. Yeah, it's still I'm a little young, but I was 25 and ignoring the things, not looking at the bigger picture, um, kind of getting focused in on superficial things instead of focusing on what I should have been. And there were times that she would be like fighting with family members or fighting with other people that um, over like super trivial things and high emotions all the time and like high drama from the very beginning. And it's kind of like a TV episode, right? Do you watch TV, JD?
I do watch.
Okay. Any like dramas? You like any? Yeah. So if you ever like if you think of the moments in your favorite TV shows where you're like your heart's kind of pumping, you're like leaning on the edge of your seat, like, oh man, what's gonna happen next? Well, that's what it's like being in a relationship with somebody that has lots of drama and that's kind of a narcissist. It's like you keep getting kind of pulled back in over and over again, and you're like, but you think that you can fix it, right? Like you think that you're like, man, I can get through this. Like we're gonna get on the next side of this thing, and it's gonna be amazing. And it's always what's next, right? Like we're gonna get through this, and everything's gonna get better after that, and we're gonna sail away. But then as soon as you get through that storm, there's just a bigger storm on the other side of it. And your mind, I think, um, t- alters itself to want it. People crave that emotion. Some like that's why like you watch On Patrol Live, right? Like Live PD, like you you look for it. You That's why TV shows are surrounded with it, right? You've always got it in every story, like every
Reality TV is so popular because it's drama.
yeah.
Like some of it like artificial drama, and we still eat it up.
And so the wild thing is, I do not like drama. I cannot stand it. I'm not a big fan of it. Um, just overall, like it's just not my thing. The only kind of drama that I like is in sports, and generally if it's not my team, because then it's funny
Yeah.
to like kind of laugh at everybody else's team. I don't like if it's my team though. But people they crave on it, right? And your brain is, I think, kind of gets wired into it. Like it's like a drug, it has to have it.
Yeah.
Um, so we like, we there's some red flags there, of, like like I said, like high emotion and whatnot that had started off, but kind of ignored them. And um, I really liked your family. Our family was like they were really cool, really great people. Most of them very successful in their lives and had good relationships from what I could tell. Everybody but basically her parents had good relationships in the family. And I was like, okay, well, a family like this, like, you're raised by a village. Whether you want to or not, it always takes a village. So I'm like, well, this village is pretty good. So there's a couple flags here, but it can't be that. Like, look at how amazing her family is. It's got to be it's they've got to be great, right? So she's got to be okay. And unfortunately, that wasn't what happened. And as soon as the mantra goes, once you put a ring on it, everything else stops. It's like it's like the honeymoon phase until that ring happens, and then once the ring happens, it's like, okay, I don't have to give a crap anymore. Um, and it kind of played out that way. It was like high work, high effort until the ring, and then once the ring came on, it's like you jumped off a cliff and you just kept falling, but there was no bottom.
I mean, was that like one-sided or was that like kind of double-sided?
I think it was one sided for the most part. I think we're there. It takes two to make a relationship, right? So the relationship definitely didn't go without any fault on my behalf, for sure. Um, Work life balance was a really big struggle for a long time. I went to school full time for several years while running a business, trying to grow a business full time. Um, in addition to during COVID and running great business networking and starting a chamber, right? So I was like working. I think I put in like 14 to 16 hours a day every day, including the weekends for like 5 or 6 years. So that combination between that and then recurring issues that kept coming up with her and the continuous drama, um, we never really focused at all on the relationship. We focused on everything else but it. Whether it was her medical, her drama, the business, me working, kids, trying to blend a family of two kids from two different relationships. Like everything else in the world was the focus but the relationship.
Gotcha. And then, so let's go back to like red flags real quick.
Mhm.
Because that is such a big term I feel like on social media today is red flags.
It is. You seen the video of the guy running around with a red flag? Yeah.
So obviously you said that there were indications of red flags. You kind of just pushed it aside and ignored them. Was there a moment to where it kind of like hit you, like, oh my God, there's so many red flags, or was it kind of like a slow, like, okay, I've been ignoring these red flags, like, kind of like what helped you finally like understand?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think it came on a little bit quicker, but it wasn't like all of them hit me at one time. It was like the more frustrated I got and the wilder the story got, the more that I could connect it back to something that I had ignored previously. There was a early on in the relationship, there were a couple fights between her and a family member that um, were like intense fights. Not physical, but intense. Um, and like not like we've all been teenagers, right? Like I definitely got into some yelling matches with my parents as a teenager, but since the age of about 17, 16-ish, I don't think I've gotten in any more yelling matches with my parents. And I've kind of come to the conclusion over the last decade that they probably knew more than I did at that time, and they probably still know more than I do now. Um, that never happened with her. So she was still having like screaming matches with her parents at like 30 something. So, like that was a big one. And of course, that red flag ended up manifesting itself years later in um, her physically fighting, like physically abusing me in fights, throwing stuff at me across the house, and like making like throwing punches at me in the front yard at night and stuff like craziness. And as we had more and more issues that happened throughout the relationship, um, she just continued to kind of raise that bar on the intensity, um, until it got to that level. And that's whenever, once it finally crossed the physical line, I was like, well, if she was fighting with her parents like that, 7 years ago. Yeah, that was a big red flag. And then, um, just inability to kind of keep, like, she would complain about others at work all the time, or her jobs, and she changed jobs a couple times, I think, in the first like 2 or 3 years of being together. And most people can keep a job for multiple years. Most employers don't want to have to replace employees. And if every place you go, you're always complaining about everybody else, then the problem's probably you, not the job. Um, and then over time, that kind of, looking back, I'm like, oh, I think after like the fourth, like after maybe the fourth or fifth job change, or for a while, she's like helping me with the business, and she always complaining about people in the business, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really have those issues with anybody. Um, so there, I could start, like, as things would happen in the last 2 years, where I started kind of realizing that this is headed in a bad direction, and without some serious intervention, it's not going to fix itself. Um, I could connect them back to red flags that I had ignored in the beginning, which ironically kind of led me to one of the biggest lessons I think that I learned through the relationship that I've implemented now, which led to the current relationship that I'm in, is, knowing what you really want, and not just like making a list. But the problem is that, like, people, whenever they make lists, I think that a lot of people make lists based on superficial stuff. I want, what is it? Somebody in finance with a trust fund, 6'5" and blue eyes. I think, right? That's the current trend. Yeah, that's gonna get you far.
That one's a little superficial, just
Yeah.
a bit.
Um, Cars, even family to some extent doesn't determine how your relationship's gonna turn out. Um, what I started looking at the end of the relationship, and whenever I was trying to determine, what I really did is I made a list of like all the stuff that I would want in somebody, and I tried to make it as hard as I possibly could. I listed 47 things that I would want in a future partner, and I'm like, there's no way I'll ever meet anybody that will make all 47 things on this list. It's impossible. And then the person that I found shortly after had all 47 things, which she does. It took almost 8 months to get through enough dates to verify it. I would intentionally go on dates trying to pick like one thing on the list to cross her off the list for. And then my rule to myself is, if I don't find, like, if I can cross one of these things off, it's over. And 8 months later, I hadn't crossed her off, and I had crossed off the list. So I think going into, it's not just a relationship though. I think going into life, going into a business, going into a job, going into, if you're considering careers in high school or college, doing your due diligence to know yourself a little better, and knowing what you really want, what you enjoy. You change over time, but I think there's a lot of core things that people don't change on, and knowing what those things are, and knowing what you're willing to stand, like, withstand, and what you're not, for compatibility, is a really big deal that sets you up for success.
So, looking back and like knowing what you know now, do you feel that there may have been some like avoidance or any reason as to why you didn't address the red flags as they came up?
Man, that's a good question. um I don't I don't necessarily know that there's a reason behind why I avoided them. um I haven't really thought as much about that. More so, like, I know that I did. I think that some of it was being naive, thinking that I could, like, I was a pretty arrogant, um I was a pretty arrogant dude back then. I thought I could do whatever I wanted. Really, like I thought I could change anybody. Like I could overcome anything. The world was in the palm of my hand. Um, so the things that were flags back then, I think I just kind of had the idea in my mind, like, it won't be that big of a deal to me. Like once she doesn't live with her mom anymore, which should have been a red flag in the first place. Once she doesn't live with her mom anymore, um, well, that issue won't be there anymore. It's her and her mom that's the issue, not the inability to resolve conflict, right? That's the real issue. The inability to control your emotions. That's the real red flag. And it's, I think back then you make excuses for people, right? And you just go, oh, well, they're just a little more excited. They're more passionate. No, you have an inability to control your emotion and regulate your emotional levels to not be excessive.
Yeah. So, how would you say with the events and just everything that happened with this relationship, how would you say that it affected your work life?
A ton. I think that anytime that you have a relationship, I think, whenever I was in that relationship, I used to see videos on TikTok and stuff where people would be talking about like the person that you choose massively impacts your ability to succeed in life. It massively impacts your ability to make good decisions, happiness, all types of things.
Mhm.
And um, I was like, yeah, kind of, but it's more so internally driven, and I do believe that your happiness has to come from within. It's not going to be given to you by anybody else. It's not going to be given to you by especially a partner. If you don't go into a relationship comfortable and happy with yourself and your own life, then that person's certainly not going to create it for you. But they can significantly impact it, right? You can be very happy with yourself and your significant other suck it right out of you, or they can amplify it. And going through that, whenever your day starts off unhappy because you woke up next to that person, and your day ends unhappy, and you stay at the office as long as you possibly can to avoid being near that person, it certainly impacts everything, and it leads in those moments, it leads to burnout, right? It burns to frustration. Whenever you're unhappy and you're aggravated, you tend to carry that with you, and then you take it out on other people, which creates frustration with them. And if you are in business and you own a business and you're taking that frustration out somewhat on your employees, it's unwarranted, right? Maybe you're overreacting to things you don't need to overreact to, things that aren't as big of a deal. Um, it can lead to them being burned out and negatively affecting them, which eventually leads to turnover. And I look back on the people that I hired during that time frame, um, the conversations that I had, our efficiency. I mean, it was pretty much all down, and it was really kind of driving the business downward quickly, without realizing it. We didn't grow and profit for a couple of years. We stayed pretty plateau. Some of the plateau is luck, um, and whenever you go home, if all you're able to focus on is the relationship and you're sucked in the drama and that's your whole life and all your conversations are on that, that's all your mind is able to focus on, right? Your mind's not able to focus on numerous things. So whatever's the biggest thing going on in your life, that's what it's going to spend its attention on. So in the moment where you have a relationship that is completely overwhelming, right? You're fighting regularly, daily or every couple of days. There's high drama. Her daughter was in and out of mental institutions and stuff at the time. There was hospital visits on a regular basis. There were um, suicide threats. There were just absolutely insane occurrences happening. And we went through more in a matter of like 4 or 5 years than I think most people go through in about 50. Medical things, like she had more medical issues than my grandparents have. my mom and dad have. Like, insane. And in a matter of a couple years, right? And you throw in a deployment and all this other stuff, and it's just like living in a hurricane. And I don't, I'm sure from being in Charleston, going through a hurricane or a tropical storm, you really don't think about work as much anymore or any of the other stuff you have to do. The only thing you really focus on is making sure your house is ready and evacuating, right? It's the same thing. All of your focus is on that issue, and you're not able to take the time to slow down and reflect and think bigger on what you need to do. And what I found through my current relationship, right? So the person I've been with now for a while, um, is incredible. She's very level headed. She um, is educated. She's thoughtful. She is able to bring great insight and advice into whenever you have, it's not that you don't go through difficult situations in life. And in the last year and a half, going through the divorce and everything else that happened, there's been times that I've needed good advice. Being able to have that person there in those moments is super helpful to guide your thoughts, and make sure you stay on track, right? So the person you're with can either align you with all the goals that you're going after, or they can completely distract you from them. And um, being with the person I'm with now has been in that alignment. And over the last 6 to 8 months, I've been able to see a direct reflection in my company with the benefits of that relationship versus the previous several years of negative. Things are on track now to see hopefully a growth in profit and revenue this year. Um, Production's better. We're making less mistakes as a company. Things are headed in the right direction. And it still takes time. And part of what having a good relationship does is it also, you want to spend time in that relationship and you want to go do things, right? So the a negative of a good relationship is that you don't spend quite as much time working as you probably should, because you want to spend a little more time playing, versus if you're unhappy, you kind of spend more time in the business to block everything else out, hopefully. Um, but the quality of what you're doing whenever you're spending time working is significantly higher if you have the right person.
Yeah, and I think I've been here long enough to be able to attest that there is truth to that and that there is a significant change since she has become a part of your life.
Yeah, it's the little things don't matter quite as much. The bigger picture becomes much bigger, and becomes much easier to focus on. And if you're happy, it radiates.
And so going back, so how did you know that it was time to leave and how did you find the strength to do so?
There were several moments that I had the thought leading up to it. There were several moments, several different days that my best friend and my family had kind of said, "Hey, you really need to be considering what's happening here. You need to be watchful of the events that are occurring here, and you need to kind of be considering protecting yourself." Um, I had a business. I have a background in law enforcement, with the Air Force for 17 years now. And there's certain things that can and cannot happen whenever you work in law enforcement or you're in the military, one of which is domestic violence. And in today's age, most domestic violence is he said, she said, and it comes down to who has a mark on them and who doesn't. And while I wasn't uh, provoking or trying to engage with any of the violence or abusive things that were occurring, you have to defend yourself. And um, there were a couple of instances over 2 or 3 months that um, where she was actively like punching me in the head and the face and the side and throwing stuff at me, and I was having to like I had to hold her to the ground to prevent her from continuing to do so. And if you're in a fight, whenever that happens, it's not like you just like, hey, stop, lay on the ground. You've got to kind of force that person to the ground and prevent them from continuing to do what they're doing. And thankfully, I've had training in doing so, so I was able to utilize that and was able to get her to go down to the ground safely without injury. But what if she had tripped? What if she fell in a hole? What if she hit something on the way down and there was a bruise? There was a physical, you know, injury. It would be very easy for a cop to show up, see an injury on her, see no injury on me, her make a claim that I was the instigator, and me get potentially charged for that, even though I didn't do anything. And if that had happened, it would throw away a lifetime of work in law enforcement in the military and all the benefits I had worked for. And those really stood out to me. And then what really kind of signified it to me, like the last step, was that her daughter was in an institution um, that they were going to release her from for the holidays. And the institution would not send her home so long as I was there because they were concerned that she would either come home and make a claim that I did something to her, or she would come home and attempt to harm me in some way or kill me as she had threatened to do to get me out of her life. And up to that point, I like what had kind of kept me in the relationship for so long was we have kids. I don't want to take my kid through another divorce. I don't want to like I stay together kind of until they get older and let's see what happens. Maybe this gets better. Um, and it kind of I reached a point that I realized that her daughter hated me, hated everything about me, to the point that she didn't want me to live anymore, and certainly didn't want me as part of her life. My son wouldn't come over, hadn't come over for about a year and a half, other than whenever I forced him to. Would only visit me whenever we were going out of town for football games and stuff. And I realized that my last excuse of keep it together for the kids and to prevent financial ruin was basically out the window because everything we had financially was getting destroyed on the business. And her kid hated me. My kid didn't want to be around me. So my some people in my life that were friends of mine and mentors and stuff that I was speaking to about everything going on. Basically, whenever I kind of laid out the events that were happening at that time, said, you know, you don't need to just leave. You need to like go grab your stuff, leave tonight. I'll Venmo you the money to get a hotel room. Do not stay there for another minute than you have to. And if in reality, I don't think you should go home without a police escort. And that was the point that I was like, okay, it's time to go. I hope that others don't reach that point, unfortunately. And there's multiple times of abuse. There's mental, there's physical, there's emotional, and typically in situations like this, you go through periods of denial, and your mind is wired to be sucked into this repeated cycle. And what I hope is that it doesn't take getting to this point for other people to realize that whenever it's time to go, I should have resonated. I should have made this move probably 2 years sooner than I did. Definitely a year and a half, and it took a lot for me to get to the point that I was willing to make the call. Um, but it's you have to know who you are. You have to know what makes you happy, and the more that you know that going into things, the quicker you're going to be able to realize whenever it's time for you to say goodbye.
Yeah. And then I want to go back just to kind of like clarify with your kid. So I'm assuming that it wasn't that your kid didn't want to be around you. I'm assuming he probably just didn't want to be in the household. So
Right.
how has your relationship with him improved since leaving that relationship?
It's improved a bunch, significantly. We talk a couple times a week now, on a regular basis. At the time, he didn't want to text me or call me a whole lot because he knows I'm asking whenever he's going to come back over, and he didn't want to have to address the question. Um, Now He works a bunch. He's of age to be working and driving, and just got accepted into a college program that's pretty demanding. So um, he's not able to see me as much as he would like to now, but we're able to talk a bunch on the phone, text regularly, and he kind of regularly, says, hey, as soon as I get a day off, I'm going to come see you. So it's nice to see that instead. He wants to be around us and enjoy the time, even if it's just for a couple hours.
Awesome. So what were some key lessons that you learned that have shaped how you approach relationships today?
Yeah, so I think the first is you have to know yourself, right? And then based on knowing yourself, you have to know what you're going to be compatible with and what really matters, right? And that really varies for every person. For me, I'm a huge sports person. I'm very active with the University of Florida and their sports, and thoroughly enjoy watching and attending. I watch just about every sport that the Florida Gators are in. Um, and so for me, like one of those things was not being a fan of another team or being open to kind of a buying into Florida. And I learned that through the past relationship that whenever you have two teams that regularly play each other, if you're very passionate about your about your team, and you're very competitive, that can create conflict. And it sounds trivial, and for some that aren't big into sports or that aren't competitive people, it probably sounds stupid. But it is who you are, right? It's no different than for some people, politics are really big, right? So a Democrat and a Republican, especially in the last 6 years, are not going to get along very well if that is an important thing to them. Thankfully for me, that's not a massive deal. I have my own opinions, but I don't necessarily have to have anybody else believe them or share them. I'm comfortable living with somebody that doesn't share them at all for all I care. But uh, if you like the Georgia Bulldogs or the South Carolina Gamecocks, we ain't gonna get along very well as a Florida Gator. This is not gonna work. Um, who gets to watch the TV on Saturdays? Who gets the big TV? Who gets the little TV? That becomes a conflict if sports are a big thing to you. Right? Travel. If whenever you go to travel, are you the person that wants to lay on a beach and doesn't want to do anything physical or explore anything? Like you want an all-inclusive resort and you don't care to leave that resort? Or are you the person that wants to go explore the city, walk around, maybe hike up a mountain, and spend a day of the 3 days lounging? That can make a big difference. And those are things that I think that people don't really think about, especially when they're young, that I learned through experience. It took me a lot of money, it took me a lot of frustration, and it took me a lot of years to figure out that whenever I go on vacation, there's certain things that I really like to do. And if I don't do them, I'm not going to be very happy. And I'm not going to be very happy with the person that prevents me from doing them. And for me, it's like getting out and exploring, right? Like I'm the guy that, like, I want to lay on the beach, play in the pool for like a day or whatever. But if I am in another country or another city, I want to go try their food. I want to go meet the culture. I want to go talk to people. Like if I'm walking down the street and somebody that seems normal, right? That seems cool. Is like, hey, you want to come over for lunch? I'm probably gonna go. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. We're meeting. Like I want to be immersed in that culture. That's why I'm there. Um, and if you aren't with somebody that appreciates that, or you are that person that's like, yeah, it's not me. Like, I want to have a margarita and a pina colada and not leave the pool the whole time I'm on vacation. It's just not going to work. But you can't know those things until you try them, right? So another lesson that I learned in addition to having that list is it's one thing to have the list. It's another thing to test it, right? I had that list. I had a similar list going into the relationship that was terrible. I didn't test it. I didn't have the money to test half of it. I couldn't vacation anywhere to begin with. The person I dated was broke, and I was broker. I didn't even have a car at the time we started dating. I rode my bike to work. into business meetings. I would only meet at a certain Starbucks in Mount Pleasant because it was in biking distance or skateboard distance of my apartment. And I would ride my bike in 100-degree weather in July to meetings in a full suit because I was also 24. So if I didn't dress like I was 40, nobody would take me serious either. So I would ride my bike to Starbucks. I'd change in the bathroom into my suit, do the meeting, change back into some shorts, and ride my bike back home afterwards. So I didn't have money to test what we did for dates, like good dates, right? I didn't test going to concerts and like what kind of music. Like, are you capable of going to a concert that I enjoy without standing there like a bump on a log? Like, can you like dance around and have some fun with me so that I can enjoy my concert just like I would do for you? For some people, like they won't go to another concert that's not their type of music, right? Like if I like heavy metal and you like country, and like for some people, they can go to the other genre and just have fun, like right, get a couple of drinks, hang out, have fun. Some will not even bother going. Like I am not going with you to that. I don't care. If you don't have the money to test that, you can't test the real level that you're willing to tolerate with that person. And you need to know those things because eventually you likely will have some money and eventually you will want to go do those things like travel and go to concerts or watch Netflix or whatever. How are you going to spend your time? And if you don't spend the time to test it up front to figure out if it bother to know if it's going to bother you or not, it sucks figuring that out later because those are the little things in the beginning that nobody pays attention to, that 5, 6, 7 years in, you'll be like, they never do anything with me or they don't like any of the stuff that I do. Well, it's, you need to know that in the beginning, and don't waste your time because there's somebody out there that will do all those things with you. And so making a list, right? So you got to know who you are first. You have to be happy with yourself. You have to be confident in who you are. Be comfortable doing things on your own, right? Like all the stuff that I do now with my current girlfriend, I would very happily do on my own without anybody and be perfectly fine. The difference is that whenever I do them with her, they're just more enjoyable. It's just more fun. And that's, I think you have to be at that place first to know who you really are, to make a list, to test that list. And then once you find that person, it's not like your relationship is bliss. You still have things that try you. You still have times that you get frustrated. You still have moments that you want to throw in the towel, even. There's, I won't say that the last year of being with the person that I'm with has been like every moment is just amazing, and I'm gonna Facebook post it left and right about how amazing we are, right? Like no, like there are times that she says stuff or does stuff, and I just like give her the eye, and I'm like, if you don't be quiet right now, I swear to God, right? Like, and she doesn't. I can see it. She makes sure I knows it, right? It's really like, you gonna pick that up? Maybe. Sometimes I'll say no just to see what her reaction is. You know, but the difference is whenever you have that person, I think you realize it, and you make changes to the things that you are capable of changing. You address the things that maybe you're not. Like there's certain things that I know that bug her that I just can't change. It's how I'm wired. I've been this way. I've been doing the same thing for 37 years. That's her age. 34 years for me. Don't go look her up. So it's like we've addressed those things, right? Like, hey, this really bugs me whenever you do this, and I've been able to say, cool, I can work on that. Or hey, I'm just not going to be able to fix that. It's like a fundamental subconscious thing that I do that there is no hope. You need to either accept it or we're going to need to make a decision because I just can't change it. And knowing that, right? You have to know yourself well enough to be able to say something like that and to work through that. Um, and just be appreciative of what you have. I think that the trials of my past have made me so much more appreciative now of whenever I, of my relationship with her, the time that I get with her, the experiences that we get. And I think that that can be applied to so much, right? I've gone through so much in business. I know we're going to kind of deep dive that in a future episode of the trials and tribulations I've gone through and running Stingray and the other companies. And in doing so, those struggles really make you appreciate whenever you have a great employee like you, a great partners, great volunteers for the other stuff that we run that's volunteer led. Um, you've got to be able to stop and appreciate the things that really matter that make everything work.
I agree. When it came to you opening yourself up to a new relationship, what are some of the things that you feel like you had to work on yourself and within?
Uh, Insecurity a little bit for me. I went whenever I exited my last relationship and I started kind of dating. I'm to be honest, I went into the dating pool like I am not gonna find anybody. I'm not even trying. Like I'm gonna find some people to go on dates with. I don't want to go. I don't want to be the dude sitting at the table by himself at the restaurant. I can do it. I don't want to, but I could. And there's some good restaurants in the city, right? I can go to a concert on my own. I can go to a football game on my own, but I don't really want to. So I was like, you know what? I'll find some people on this app to go do some stuff with, and that'll be it. Um, I, had been divorced 3 times already. I had a 16, now 17-year old. Um, I had made some other biological decisions that kind of crossed me out of the 30 to 40-year-old women pool for what most women in their 30s that are dating are looking for. And I knew that and I was comfortable with it. But there's, there's still a little bit of insecurity there, knowing that, like, if I wanted to date anybody, the chances are probably pretty low outside of just going on like actual dates and that's it. And some of that is a couple of the people that I was talking to in the apps before the person that I'm dating now emerged into a full on girlfriend and stuff. Is I would just kind of be straight up about it, like, hey, uh, I don't have any interest in marriage in the next 5 years. I don't have any interest in kids ever again. I don't want to be your stepdad, and um, I could really care less if I am in a relationship again or not. And I address kind of my insecurities by either just throwing it out there or with the person I'm with now, I actually kind of hid some of it initially. I was a little nervous about if it would ruin everything and I didn't want to screw it up. Um, but uh, told her in the moments that it came up that it needed to be brought up, and wasn't easy, but we were able to discuss it, work through it, and address the things that need to be addressed and accept the things that needed to be accepted for us to continue to move forward. And I think that, looking back now, if I were to go back into the dating pool at this point, I think that knowing the confidence level I kind of have in myself at this point, I would probably just put all that stuff like in the bio on the dating app at this point, like, hey, no kids, not gonna happen. Like 5 years, like I would just throw it up, like divorce 3 times, here you go. Like I would stick it in the freaking bio so that they could just everybody could just swipe left to begin with, and the ones that finally swipe right, I would like I don't have to talk about it on the date, right? I'd be like, here's the description, just read the bio, okay?
You would end up being a TikTok video.
Pretty much. Oh, I'm sure. Oh, I seen a girl lately. It's like she's like going through and analyzing people's bios and pictures. Yeah, I'd be that one.
There's like somebody that she does like a skit based off of like Tinder bios.
Hmm.
Um,
Isn't she's in Charleston? I think too. I've seen a girl in Charleston that does it.
oh, okay. I don't know, but she does like a skit where if the Tinder bio was in person and basically like plays the part of the male typically. And I think at this point she gets like followers that send her
Hmm.
like screenshots and stuff. But yeah, it's really funny. But that's
I would definitely end up in a skit at this point. Like, I would probably end up like either being made fun of as like either this guy's a total playboy or this guy just doesn't care at all. And both of those would probably be correct at this point. Um, I would be willing to say that if the relationship I'm in now somehow does not work out, I will probably throw away all hope for dating for the remainder of my lifetime because I think I've this is like the polar extreme opposite of everything I had in the beginning, that all crashed and burned. So if something this successful doesn't work out, then I just know that I'm destined to not be in a relationship at that point.
So, what advice would you give to listeners who may be struggling in a toxic relationship but are unsure about when it's time to leave?
Um, I think you have to have a support network. I think you need to be talking. You need to go see a counselor. You need to go talk to somebody. I was in counseling through most of the chaotic craziness that was going on. I was in counseling at the end of it, and I was in counseling for several months after it. And you need to have a non-biased person that can help give you good information in addition to your family and friends. And you need to listen to your family and friends because they generally have your best interests at heart. And you know which friends those are, the ones that are really willing to tell you it straight. They're not jealous, they're not trying to ruin your life, right? They're your genuine close friends. And if they're saying the same thing that the counselor is saying, it's time to listen. um, I think that's a big deal. if you're if you're wishing your partner was dead versus having to wake up to them, if you're wishing you died on the way home, if you're depressed, right? Not just like, because I know people go through depressive times and stuff, but if you are genuinely depressed because of your relationship and you've been in that way for a long time, if you uh for me, like, I would talk continuously to my ex about this stuff. I would bring it up multiple times a month, generally at least once a week. Like, hey, here's the things that we're doing that are frustrating me. Here's some things I wish you would change. Here's some things that, like, we really have to address these issues. We need to figure this stuff out. I would try to bring some logic, and I would really try to communicate, and I did for in the entirety of our relationship, and a lot in the last 18 months, to try to prevent it reaching the point that it did. And if you are doing that, and it's just, there are other, like, what happened with me is my ex would listen, or she would like sit there, usually playing on her phone and smoking a cigarette the whole time while I was talking, and then be like, yeah, 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 we'll get to that. Yeah, you're totally right. I need to change that. I need to address that. And then, like, later that day or the next day, they're doing the exact same thing you just talked about. That person's checked out, and it's not going to fix itself. And whenever you start realizing that, that, like, man, I am like repeating myself 100 times over, um, those are the times to start reconsidering what's going on. And in the moment that I had to make this decision, I had gotten some advice from an attorney, about a year prior, that had told me that, like, look, terrible decision to leave because you're going to end up, like, owing all kinds of money. You're going to be paying alimony. Like, you're going to lose your house. You're going to lose your business. You're going to lose everything. Like, you're going to be financially ruined for decades. And I was like, man, that's like, I don't know that this is that bad that I'm willing to give up everything I've worked for in my life to get out of this. Um, and it still hit that head that I was like, forget it. I don't care. But if that's the advice you've gotten, like, go talk to another attorney, because that's the opposite of what happened whenever I left. Like, thankfully, my ex helped it along a little bit, providing the attorney with some good stuff to undo a few of the things that could have been done. But, like, get good advice. And I was laying there, like, thinking about that, knowing that my ex was out. goofing off with other guys at a bar, refusing to come home, screaming and like being threatened with, by her kid and like all this crazy stuff going on. And even then, I was trying to come up with reasons to not leave and to stay, fighting through this. And if you are at that point, it's time. Like, you've got to make the move. Life is, you only get one life on this planet, you know, it, and it's short. It's short. There's a lot that you can do in it. There's a lot to experience. There is zero reason you should live it unhappy. It it's not like you get bonus points at the end of it and you get an extra year or something if you live in torment or a nightmare for a decade. It it just doesn't work that way. So, you may get some backlash, you may get some people that don't like you for it, it may be hard, and it was really hard. The first like 6 months was a nightmare, financially, drama wise. The whole year of the divorce was like, it was like the roller coaster just continued. um but the light at the afterwards is so much better. And you've got to take care of you. You've got to put yourself first, and just don't throw away this life that the world has given you, because you're not going to get another one.
So, how do you think your past experiences have kind of affected or helped with your self awareness?
Well, so I've always been big in personal development. Ever since like high school, I've been listening to different personal development authors: Tony Robbins, Frank Coyne, Jim Rohn, Grant Cardone, Brendan Dawson, lots of different authors and books. So I think that always kind of helped me stay like improving upon myself and my own kind of awareness of things. But really, the last year of the relationship did more for me in terms of personal awareness as to who I was and what I liked and didn't like than any other time in my life. Um, I would constantly invite my ex to go do stuff, go out of town to games, go on a trip, go out to eat, and just get rejected over and over and over and over again. And I was a very dependent person, codependent. I really wanted to be with somebody. Quality time is my number two love language. And whenever you get rejected over and over again, to the point that you like, I got to the point by summer of the year that I left in December. I got to the point in that summer that I was literally only asking out of courtesy, fully expecting and knowing that the answer was going to be no. I just knew that I had to ask to prevent a fight. And I got so comfortable. The like going to Florida football games is a big deal for me. I'm a season ticket holder. I go to all of them, and I went to all of them by myself, or like with my adolescent kid or my best friend, right? But never with my spouse. To the point that the people I was tailgating with had no idea who my spouse actually was. I knew I was married, but that was it. They'd never met her in like a year and a half of going to these tailgates with all these people. And I became aware that I can go do things on my own and have plenty of fun. I do not need somebody with me. I like this about this. I enjoy this. I was really completely in control of whatever I wanted to do with my time. Didn't have to care at all about who I asked, who wanted to go do things with me, what I was going to do for the weekend. I could do whatever I wanted because I didn't have anybody to share the experience with or to ask a question from. And through that, it really helped teach me, for the first time in my life, that I was okay being alone. I was okay doing it on my own. I could have plenty of fun and enjoy my life without anybody in it. And ironically, the relationship that had taken so much and had been such a nightmare also was probably the most beneficial thing that I have ever had in my dating and relationship life, because it gave me all of the lessons that I needed to have that I had never taken the time myself to get to.
So to kind of get into the closing, is there anything that you like want to add or that you want listeners to hear kind of before we close out?
Yeah, I think if you're in a situation like the one I've described with a relationship or a business or anything like that, you should know that you're not alone. Um, you should know that there are a lot of resources out there to help you. If you are contemplating suicide, um, as I have been, I like had done through this process multiple times. Please call 988. Call the National Crisis Line. Speak with somebody. It's free. Um, I've called them. They're there to help. Um, and uh, would definitely encourage you to feel free to message me if you relate and you needed some advice or just to vent. I'm here. I'm happy to help to listen and help people. And there are a lot of people probably in your inner circle that have gone through situations like this, unfortunately, and connect with them and let them help you. Um, just reach out. You don't have to go through this stuff alone.
Exactly. And I'm sorry that you've gone through that, and I'm glad that you are past it and better in a more positive light and space.
Absolutely. Yeah, the light is brighter. Everything in this life is temporary. Everything. So it doesn't matter where you are today. It doesn't matter what you're going through today. Good or bad, it's temporary. It can continue to be good if you continue to put in the work and the effort required to keep it that way. If it's bad, you can stop it and you can turn it around at any point that you choose to.
As we wrap up today's episode, remember that in the face of adversity, there is always the potential for growth, resilience, and success. And join us next time as we continue to explore inspiring stories of overcoming challenges and thriving in the journey of life.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.